Happy July and welcome to Clarke Consulting's new video series. Every month we're going to record and post video on our YouTube channel that shares highlights of some of the work we've been doing lately, as well as government relations and nonprofit news from Canada. Anything we think might be of interest to people who follow us and to our clients. So really glad you can join us today. My name is Jessie Clarke. My pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and CEO of the firm. I founded it back in February 2021. I have had a long career both in the federal government as well as in nonprofits, and I am very passionate about helping nonprofits work more effectively with government, whether that's through gaining needed funding or influencing policy, learning how to speak on behalf of their communities and really make change. I really believe firmly that the nonprofit sector should be doing more with government, should be speaking out more, and should be more engaged. And I really believe that the nonprofit sector is essential for Canadians and for many people around the world as well. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to talk just briefly about some news, government, politics highlights for the last month or so. Just a selection because there's always a lot going on. And then tell you a bit about the work we've been doing in our firm and some other issues of interest in the sector that I wanted to highlight. So thanks so much for joining us. Um, if I look back on July, one of the big and most exciting events that was happening, certainly on my timeline, and for which I was actually feeling some FOMO, I said, was what looked like an incredibly dynamic and effective conference called Women Deliver in Kigali, Rwanda. Many Canadian organizations were represented there. The focus of that meeting was on sexual and reproductive health and rights globally. I was really personally really encouraged to see much stronger conversation around LGBTQIA plus issues. As someone who's a member of that community myself, it's really encouraging to see that taking a more prominent place in the global agenda. And of course, was happy to see the Government of Canada representatives highlighting those issues, among others. We were represented by the federal cabinet ministers, Harjit Sajjan, who's the Minister of International Cooperation, as well as Minister Marcy Yen, who's Minister of Youth, as well as MP Ariel Kayabaga, who is from a Rwandan Canadian herself and has been taking a very active role in Canadian government work around Africa specifically in recent months. So great to see that strong representation. And with that representation, there were, of course, some announcements. An overall general announcement was of $200 billion that was basically channeled to various projects under an envelope that they call She Soars. And essentially, the purpose of that $200 billion is to really focus funding on neglected and underfinanced areas of SRHR. So, in particular, family planning, comprehensive sexuality education, advocacy for SRHR, safe abortion and post-abortion care, and sexual and gender-based violence. And it's not like these are new issues to the Canadian government or their priorities. They've been a core part of Canada's overall commitment to these issues and of certainly the feminist international assistance policies implementation as well. But it's good to see the focus on these issues, and I particularly was encouraged to see funding for advocacy, which is such a critical area and often not very well funded. So some of the examples of the projects they funded under that envelope included a project to some funding, $10 million in funding to Mary Stopes International, which is a very well-known global INGO working on SRHR issues in many countries. There was also some additional funding that was outside of that $200 million window that was on a related gender equality topic. In this case, it focused on caregiving and supporting caregivers. And this was a $25 million in funding for IDRC project that will work with women leaders and local experts to learn more about and develop solutions for unpaid care work, as well as $5.2 million for Oxfam Canada's Time to Care project, which specifically addresses gender norms and supports progressive care policies. And as always, further details are available on the Government of Canada's website. So moving now back from Kigali back to Ottawa, as it is July and it's that time of year again, the Parliamentary Finance Committee has opened the period for written submissions for pre-budget consultations. We will post a link for more details in the comments. The deadline is earlier than usual this year. It's actually August 4th, which is coming up very soon. Make sure that you're prepared. I really see this as like such a I would actually say like kind of a no-brainer for most organizations. You want to be involved. The government is inviting you with open arms to make a submission. And if you can submit to the Finance Committee, it's particularly effective because then you have a much better chance of being invited to speak in front of the Finance Committee as well, and have your leaders meet with MPs in the committee and address your issues. So the template is available on the government's website. Again, we'll share the link. And there's a template they provide that gives I think 2,000 words of space and gives a very specific format that they ask you to follow. So certainly look at that guidance and follow it closely. Um, I think the other some of the other resources that are available, Imagine Canada always has a great toolkit on the pre-budget consultations, and they share their consultation publicly as a model, as do many other organizations. Um, and finally, myself and a good colleague of mine, Catherine LeBlanc of LeBlanc & Co. Consulting, who focuses on communications, she and I co-hosted a webinar a couple of weeks ago, all about the pre-budget consultation period and how to take best advantage of it for your organization. And that webinar has been recorded, and we'll be able to share that link with you shortly as well. If you're interested, feel free to reach out. And happy to make sure you're on the list for receiving that. And there's also many other opportunities that come about, provincially and otherwise, but the federal government is the one that sort of kicks the process off earliest and has the two separate rounds that are really worth engaging with as well. Another new government resource that I wanted to highlight that was at least new to me, and I don't think it's been around for very long, is something called the Government of Canada Infobase. It's a new tool that's been developed by the Treasury Board Secretariat. It's a data visualization tool for Canadians to dig into some of the key metrics around government departments, how they spend their money, how they deliver on programs, their impact, their results, and also information about human resources. And so I encourage you to go into that database, and again, we'll post a link, and look for information on subjects of interest to you, departments that you're interested in engaging with. It's always great to see these new transparency initiatives, and I mean, it's not to say you still don't need to kind of work pretty hard to find what you're looking for and engage, but I definitely think it's a step in the right direction. And as always, happy to show you how to work through it. Certainly for any of our current retainer clients, it's something we're going to be offering. Will be a regular monitoring of that as well, that reporting. So if you're interested in learning how to work with those tools or how we can support you as well with them, please feel free to reach out. So that's definitely worth looking into. And I've highlighted this before, but just in conjunction with that, many people don't know that there's actually a public database of all of the projects that the federal government has funded. And that public database is available when you go into canada.gc.ca, and I'll again post the link, and you can look at all of the government funding over the last 15 years from different departments in different sectors. Again, a really great way to get a sense of what is going on out there, what is the government working on, what have they funded, and a good way to do a bit more homework on potential funders for yourself as well in your organization. And finally, then I just wanted to talk a bit more about some of the sector news. I think a couple of things to highlight here. One is that something that's been really preoccupying, rightfully so, I think the focus of a lot of folks in the nonprofit sector here in Toronto, where I'm based, and in Canada, I would say, have been the now substantiated and really discouraging allegations of racism. In fact, not just allegations, but the racist incidents that are confirmed to have happened within the leadership of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. So there's been an incredible amount of work done by many colleagues, particularly by the Black colleagues who are the focus of that experience and who have really, done a huge service to the community here by stepping forward and taking leadership on these issues. And I'm thinking of Mide at Carusi in particular, just because I've worked with him in the past at Pathways and know him quite well, and he has now agreed to take on the role of the chair of the Association of Fundraising Professionals Toronto chapter. And there have been a number of steps made towards apologies and downgrading the chapter's status, which was something that was called for as well. So it seems from the leaders that have been really working on this issue, that they feel it's now appropriate to re-engage, but re-engage, I think with a really strong lens to ensuring that work is done much better, and that the AFP GTA certainly takes on takes anti-racism and its role and leadership very seriously. So excited to see what's going to come in the future from that, and really appreciative again of those who had really put themselves out there in the line and called out the racism that they experienced. And glad to see, although it was really in many respects too little too late, glad to see an apology as well, and some movement on that from AFP Toronto. And that kind of dovetails nicely with another report that came out this past month that I think is particularly interesting for the sector as well in light of those conversations. And it's Imagine Canada again. Hat tip to them, because for someone who's a nonprofit and government relations nerd, it's hard to imagine a more useful resource than a lot of the work that they do in their organization. And they conducted a survey actually last summer, where they surveyed over 1,500 nonprofit leaders in Canada, and really dug deep on organizational commitment to equity, diversity, inclusion, and the impact of changes that have been made, the extent to which changes have been made, what else needs to be done. And they released this report in July. Again, we'll post a link to the report summary. I suggest you look at the summary at very least, but definitely read through the report as well. And there were a number of key findings that I think are of interest to all of us working in the sector, and particularly maybe some for funders as well, that I wanted to highlight and talk about from a GR perspective. So, really very clearly what came about, what became clear is that, the degree of deep commitment and transformation taking place in organizations is much greater in organizations that are led by people of color, or by other people who face some kind of marginalization or underrepresentation, and that white-led organizations are typically not really that shocking, but are the slowest to move on these issues and have made the least at work in terms of deep changes. So, and I think, they call out something that I think, again, is not very surprising, that most nonprofit leaders support equity, diversity, and inclusion, but far fewer pursue it with deep intentionality. Um, and they also say that leadership and management structures such as equity working groups, and I think I would say also, like, and where those equity working groups are positioned and who they're accountable to, that really matters. That those who have established those that involve senior leadership and senior managers, and have really made a strong commitment at the organizational level, are the ones who've seen the most transformation. And I think one of the issues they highlight as well that I think is quite interesting, is that funders themselves have a key role to play in advancing equity, diversity, inclusion, specifically by supporting Black, Indigenous, and other racialized-led organizations, and other organizations that are committed to advancing EDI. And as someone who's worked a lot in the international cooperation sector in Canada, and I trained in gender equality, was a gender equality specialist way back in 2009, 10 at CETA. It was amazing what kind of transformation we saw in the sector finally when the government announced the Feminist International Assistance Policy. There had been obviously an acknowledgement and some degree of engagement by organizations, but I think that was a really transformational moment for the sector, for the international cooperation sector, in terms of taking those issues seriously once they learned they were going to be evaluated on the basis of how effective they were by one of their key funders. And so I think that's a really important lesson for this moment in Canada, vis-a-vis reconciliation, vis-a-vis anti-racism and anti-Black racism particularly, that there's a real opportunity for the government to take some more leadership and action in really ensuring that organizations that work with them meet certain standards. If they're going to be funding organizations, that they reflect key equity and diversity standards, And I think also, as always, in really targeting funding to build the capacity of the sector in those areas, which I know is happening certainly to some extent, but can always be done more. Um, and I think it would be really exciting to see some kind of rigorous framework that would be part of approvals for new funding. So those are just a few of my reflections from kind of July nonprofit news and government relations news. Um, and I just want to stay tuned for a few things we've got coming out in August that I wanted to mention as well. Um, we've been doing a lot of thinking on different issues leading from the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. We're very committed to working ourselves as a firm to creating a strong framework for our own work on this area. Um, and we've had the opportunity to conduct some training, although I would not position myself in any way, shape, or form as an expert. But I am really interested in the intersection between those issues and government relations, and how we can really leverage government relations to push inclusion further. So stay tuned for more thinking on that. We've also this month been running an amazing course that I've been really privileged to engage with this great cohort of leaders every week in the nonprofit sector in Canada who want to learn a lot more about how to really connect deeply with government, understand government financial cycles and budgets and economic updates, and understand how to engage most effectively from policy advocacy standpoint, and how to develop really strong proposals that are in line with what the government is looking for. So that's been the kind of the 4 different focuses of our Get Ready to Grow course that we launched this summer. And we've had an amazing cohort of 8 leaders from all different parts of Canada's nonprofit sector participating. And it's been going so well that I think we're going to do another course this fall. So stay tuned for the announcement on that and the opportunity to join the waiting list. That'll be going out soon. And as always, hope you can join us for that. And feel free to reach out at any time if you have questions, you want to learn more about our work, about how we can support you in really elevating your government relations work and making your organization work more effectively with government. Thank you.